So tonight I ask you, how did we get here to the brink of impeachment? Well, the scandal's actually been in the works for months. It exploded into public view, set off, we can now see, by two very critical events. They actually happened on the same day, on September 9th. Democrats announced they were actually going to go forward to investigate Giuliani's then suspicious dealings with Ukraine. And a top intelligence official then told Schiff a whistleblower had filed this mysterious complaint. They would not reveal what it was about, and it was not at that time yet shared with Congress.
The director has said essentially that he is answering to a higher authority and refusing to turn over the whistleblower complaint.
He or she has evidence of serious misconduct.
I think it's fair to assume this involves either the president or people around him or both.
So, watch this space, as they say.
Americans have been watching ever since, and the reporting has been filling in the blanks fast. Soon, there were these clues that the complaint involved Trump's, quote, communications with a foreign leader. Okay, that was interesting. The very next day, that foreign country was named, Ukraine, and then the alleged Trump promise. Now, considering what we have come to know, it is pretty interesting that it was right in the middle of that whirlwind that I'm just giving you a couple of the highlights on that John Bolton suddenly resigned. And many of the typical explanations were offered, along with references to disagreements between him and Trump. Fine. Policy disagreements are common, really. They're fine to have as a reason to leave. But now we know Bolton and others have testified that he didn't just object on policy, but on alleged crime, objecting in real time to his now famous phrase, the, quote, drug deal that Sondland and Mulvaney were cooking up. Meanwhile, President Trump, in a rarity perhaps, completely backed down. He released the military aid, and then he coughed up something that actually very few presidents ever release under any circumstances, which is the private and typically classified readout of that call, that incriminating call with the president of Ukraine. All of it leading less than a month after those initial reports we just showed you to Speaker Pelosi announcing an official impeachment probe.
I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. The president must be held accountable. No one is above the law.
An historic day in Washington, a resolution laying out the impeachment process by an overwhelming majority.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
That is what power sounds like. The Speaker acts. The resolution is adopted. And then, boy, do the wheels start turning fast. Subpoenas, depositions, public hearings, the breaking stories we've all been following. And then, because of those rules, because of how that power was deployed, the bombshell testimony.
I was concerned by the call. What I heard was inappropriate.
Mr. Giuliani, side channels, quid pro quos, corruption.
Efforts to gin up politically motivated investigations.
Did you feel threatened?
I did.
Was there a quid pro quo? The answer is yes. We followed the president's orders.
I'm joined now by Maya Wiley, former counsel of the mayor of New York City and a former civil prosecutor at the Southern District of New York, and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. Good evening to both of you. Joyce, taking the wider view that we get to do sometimes, what strikes you as an investigator in just how quick all of that happened and what it sets up as the Judiciary Committee prepares for these future hearings?
I think that the speed with which this unfolded is one of the most interesting features of this entire process in front of the Intelligence Committee. You know, typically the president is quick to come up with a new conspiracy theory or a reason that he shouldn't be held accountable as events unfold. But here the pace of testimony was so quick, the drop of news every day of expanding detail was so fast that the president literally couldn't keep up. And I think that that's one of the smart parts of the process in front of the House Intelligence Committee, is that speed of process.
Yeah, you mentioned he couldn't keep up. A lot of us in newsrooms and those of you who report with us were just amazed, Maya, when the president was literally at the UN. So we know from what he was doing that day, he was too busy to confer, think through, or hear all the judgments about whether or not to release the call transcript. And he just decided to release the whistleblower complaint was required to be released to Congress, but the call wasn't. I wonder how fateful that looks, Maya, in setting up the conditions for what I'm about to show you which was the bombshells from Gordon Sondland in the fact-finding part of this probe. Take a look.
Was there a quid pro quo? The answer is yes. I followed the directions of the president. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. He had to announce the investigations. He didn't actually have to do them, as I understood it. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret.
Maya, would we have learned all this, and would we be on the precipice of impeachment hearings for drafting the articles if those fateful things hadn't happened, the whistleblower complaint and then the White House coughing up so much evidence?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ari, as is Joyce. The speed of this, in part, is thanks to that whistleblower complaint, which has proved so accurate. Every witness who has come forward in the House has really said exactly what the whistleblower said was reported to the whistleblower. And the whistleblower complaint itself was so detailed that it in and of itself, I think, would have resulted with where we are now. But that call summary being released on the heels of the whistleblower complaint just reinforced everything that the whistleblower complaint was alleging. It was a real double whammy, and I think that double whammy goes exactly to what Joyce was saying about the speed of this process. It really put it on steroids.
And if it's been a steroids process of fact-finding, that has been a lot of what Speaker Pelosi has empowered Adam Schiff to do, Joyce. And I don't want to oversimplify. We don't know what history will ultimately judge as these different phases. But for Democrats, at least, they have seen a Schiff phase, and they are about to enter the Nadler phase. Take a listen to Schiff here on Meet the Press, the way he makes his case. This was recently. Take a look.
There's more work to be done, but at the same time, we've already accumulated quite overwhelming evidence. There was no plausible explanation but one, and that was the president wanted this leverage to get Ukraine to do his political dirty work.
That's how he summarizes all the work he's done. Here was, for a comparison, Joyce, Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee. This just days before the Ukraine stuff really took flight. Have a listen.
Our investigation also extends beyond the four corners of the Mueller report. We are looking at corruption and abuse of power more broadly, so we will inquire about other subjects as well. We will not be daunted by the cover-up. We intend to secure accountability for any wrongdoing, because no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States.
What do you expect, Joyce, in this Nadler phase?
So it's really incredible to think about the gap of just a couple of months between that original Nadler statement and what we heard from Chairman Schiff. And Schiff cues in on the most important part of the process in front of his committee. That is that the president has essentially had no substantive answer to this narrative of wrongdoing by the president and those close to him. And also Schiff was able to lay it at the president's doorstep. So that's the legal part of this process. Now we know that Chairman Nadler and the Judiciary Committee will open with at least one day of hearings designed to lay out the legal contours. What do high crimes and misdemeanors mean? What is an abuse of trust that warrants impeachment of a president? I expect that they'll dip back to the wisdom of the founding fathers, give the country an overview of the law so that we can understand what the legal analysis looks like that we bring and that we fold those facts into.
Maya?
I agree. And I think one of the things that's going to be so important with this one day that we know so far, we never know what else is going to pop and whether more days get added between now and the 4th. But one thing that is going to be so important for the Democrats to do is decide how tailored is this story? How many counts are there? Right now, we're seeing a ream of potential counts, from bribery to extortion, obstruction, and all the various abuses of power that can be added to this. And I think the discussion they are having, I imagine, is how much of this is a story that the American public can absorb when there's a trial in the Senate, because it's as much of a story for the public as it is for the politicians. And
Joyce, both as a feather in your cap, but also as full disclosure, we remind viewers you actually testified in those same Nadler hearings that we mentioned before. Do you expect they would be similar this time, or are there differences given the temperature?
So, you know, when Barb McQuade and I testified this summer about the Mueller report, Congress was still using this process of bouncing back and forth 5 minutes aside between the Republicans and the Democrats. What we learned during the Intelligence Committee hearings was how effective the use of staff attorneys is in telling a cohesive narrative. These hearings, or at least this first day that Maya and I have talked about, that's more about the law, one would hope that they would use that sort of a process again so that the American people can really understand the law that will control as Congress moves forward. I would encourage them to use that approach.
Very interesting. Process matters, spoken by a lawyer. Joyce Vance, Maya Wiley, thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.